En esta ocasión queremos regalarles una conferencia que grabamos con el doctor Gary Chapman el año pasado. Disfrútenlo. Tenemos el gran honor de tener al doctor Gary Chapman con nosotros, escritor, conferencista y consultor familiar, apasionado por las personas y por ayudarlas a construir relaciones duraderas. Todos buscamos amar y ser amados. Si estás en una relación, las personas que más te gustaría que te quisiera, que te amara, es tu pareja. Sin embargo, lo que hace que una persona se sienta amada puede que al otro no lo haga. Hoy vamos a aprender sobre los 5 lenguajes del amor, cómo descubrir tu propio lenguaje y el de tu pareja. Al expresar el amor en el lenguaje principal del otro, obtendrás relaciones más enriquecedoras. Welcome, Gary. It's such an honor to have you with us.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be with you and to all of those who are watching. It's a great honor. We're talking about an extremely important word, the word of love. Everybody pretty much agrees the deepest emotional need we have as humans is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. In fact, if you're married and you feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful. But if you don't feel loved by your spouse, life can begin to look pretty dark. I like to think of children as well. You know, I believe that every child has what I call an emotional love tank. You know, like a gasoline tank in a car. If it's full, you can drive the car. If it's empty, you're not going anywhere. And so children have a need to feel loved. And if the love tank is full and they feel loved by their parents, they grow up emotionally healthy. If they don't feel loved, they grow up with many internal emotional struggles. And often in the teenage years, they go looking for love, typically in all the wrong places. But I believe that adults also have an emotional love tank. And if we feel loved by the significant people in our lives, then we can process all of life much easier. But if we don't feel loved, the rest of life becomes far more difficult to process. So it's extremely important to understand how to communicate love, how to meet that deep emotional need in the lives of the people with whom we are close. So that's what I want to address. Now, here's the problem in doing that. We have assumed that what makes one person feel loved will make another person feel loved. And that's a false assumption. I'll never forget the first time I encountered this in my office. A couple came in to see me. I didn't know them. I found out they'd been married to each other for 30 years. She started talking when she sat down. She said, Dr. Chapman, let me just tell you a little bit about us before we start. She said, I just want you to know that we don't argue. We don't believe in arguing. And we don't have any money problems. She said, I read an article that said money is one of the biggest problems in marriage. She said, not for us. She went on with 2 or 3 more positive things. And I was beginning to wonder, did they come in here to tell me what a good marriage they have? But then she started crying. And she said, but the problem is, I don't feel any love coming from him. We're like 2 roommates, you know, just sharing a house together. He does his thing and I do my thing. And she said, I just feel so empty and I don't know how long I can go on like this. Well, I looked at her husband and he said, I don't understand her. I do everything I can to show her that I love her. And she sits there and tells you what she's been telling me, that she doesn't feel loved. He said, I don't know what else to do. I said, well, what do you do to show your love to her? He said, well, I get home from work before she does, so I start the evening meal. And sometimes I have it ready when she gets home. If not, she'll help me. We eat together, and after we eat, I wash the dishes. He said, Thursday night, I vacuum the floors. He said, Saturday, I wash the car, I mow the grass, I walk the dog, I help her with the laundry. And he went on, and I was beginning to wonder, what does this woman do? It sounded to me like he was doing everything. And he said, I do all of that, and she says she doesn't feel loved. I looked back at her, and she said, Dr. Chapman, he's right. He is a hard-working man, but we don't ever talk. We haven't talked in 20 years. He's always mowing the grass, walking the dog, you know, he's always doing something. So I realized here was a sincere husband who in his mind was loving his wife, and a wife who didn't get it. And after that, I heard similar stories over and over in my office. And I knew that people were missing each other. They were trying, in their mind, they were communicating love, but they weren't connecting. And so I knew there was a pattern, but I didn't know what it was. So eventually I took time to sit down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling people and asked myself the question, when someone sat in my office and said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages. And I started using that in my counseling. That if you want her to feel love, you've got to express love in her language. If you want him to feel love, you've got to express love in his language. And I would help couples discover what I call their primary love language. And then I would challenge them to go home and try it. And sometimes they would come back in 3 weeks and say, Gary, this is changing everything. I mean, the whole climate's different now. And then I started using it in small groups of couples, and the same thing would happen. Probably 5 years later, I thought if I could put this concept in a book, write it in the language of the common person, maybe I could help a lot of couples that I would never have time to see in my office. Little did I know that the book would sell now over 14 million copies in English and be translated and published in over 50 languages around the world. Most importantly, in Spanish. And that really surprised me because I did an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in cultural anthropology before I studied counseling. So I was very sensitive to cultural differences. And when the Spanish publisher came and wanted to publish the book in Spanish, I said, I don't know, does this work in Spanish? And my publisher said, they've read the book and they want to publish it. Well, it became their bestseller and has sold millions of copies in Spanish. And I'm very, very grateful for that. So I want to share with you the 5 love languages. If you've read the book, it'll be a review. If you haven't read the book, it will be an introduction. So 5 ways to express love. And this applies in all human relationships. It applies in marriage. It applies for single adults in a dating relationship or in their relationship with their parents. I find that a lot of single adults are kind of have a fractured relationship with their parents, and they don't feel loved by their parents. And so it works in that relationship. It works in a parent-child relationship, in all close relationships, because all of us have the need to feel loved, okay? So here they are. Number 1 is words of affirmation. Using words to affirm the other person. You look nice in that outfit. I really appreciate what you did. You know one of the things I like about you? It's simply using words to affirm the other person. There's an ancient Hebrew proverb that says, life and death is in the power of the tongue. You can kill people by the way you talk to them, or you can give them life. And for some people, words is their primary love language. And you give them critical words, you give them condemning words, it's like a dagger in their heart. You give them affirming words, and they flourish. They feel loved. Now, I did have one lady who said to me, Dr. Chapman, I know it would be good if I could give my husband some positive words. But to be honest with you, I can't think of anything good to say about the man. And I said, well, does he ever take a shower? And she said, well, yes. I said, how often? She said, every day. I said, if I were you, I'd start there. Honey, I appreciate you taking a shower. I said, there are men who don't. I've never met a man, never met a woman, never met a child that you couldn't find something good to say about them. And if this is their love language and you look for things to say that are positive to them, their love tank begins to fill up and they're drawn to you. You condemn them, you criticize them, you complain to them, you push them away. They want to stay away from you because you're hurting them deeply when you do that. So words of affirmation is one of the love languages. A second love language is acts of service. Doing something for the other person that you know they would like for you to do. Now in a marriage, that would be such things as washing dishes, cooking meals, vacuuming floors, washing the car, changing the baby's diaper. Woo, that's a big act of service. Anything that you know your spouse would like for you to do. For children, this would be such things as mending a doll dress, fixing a bicycle chain, anything. And with children, what you want to do is not only do things for them that they cannot do for themselves, but you want to teach them to do things so that they can do them themselves. And that's an act of service. In fact, it takes more time to teach a child how to cook than it does to cook the meal for the child. So doing things for the child, doing things for the spouse, doing things for your close friends or those that you're dating, acts of service. There's an old saying that says, action speaks louder than words. And for these people, that's true. It's not true for everyone, but it's true for them. You know, there's a New Testament scripture, 1 John chapter 3 and verse 18, that says, love not only in word, but in deed. Do something to show your love. And for these people, it's acts of service that really speak loudly to them. And if you promise to do something for them and you don't do it, it's like a slap in the face to them. I mean, it really hurts them. So you want to not only say, honey, I'll do that. I'd like to help you with that. You follow through with it. And so acts of service. And then there's gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. The gift says, they were thinking about me. Look what they got from me. Now, the gift doesn't have to be expensive. Haven't we always said it's the thought that counts? But I remind you, it's not the thought left in your head that counts. It's the gift that came out of the thought in your head, okay? I say to guys, hey, you can get flowers free in the spring and summer. Just go out in your backyard and pick one. That's what the kids do. How many mothers have ever received a dandelion from your kids? Yeah, the kids do it. And if you don't have any flowers in your backyard, your neighbor's yard, ask them, they'll give, don't steal them, ask them, they'll give you a flower.
Right.
You can pick up a stone in a city parking lot and take it home and give it to an 8-year-old boy and say, hey, I found this today and I thought about you. Look at the colors in this thing, man. I wanted you to have it. If gifts is his love language, you'll find that stone in his dresser drawer when he's 23, and he'll remember the day you gave it to him. I was talking to a husband the other day, and he said, Dr. Chapman, I knew my wife's language was a gift. He said, I was taking a walk, and I saw a bird feather. And I picked it up and took it home. And I said to her, honey, I was taking a walk, and I saw this feather, and I thought about you, and I wanted you to have it. It reminded me that you are the wind beneath my wings. I love you, girl. Woo! Didn't cost a penny, but it communicated. He used a gift and words of affirmation. So gifts can be powerful. If this is their love language, you don't give them any gifts. You skip a birthday, you skip an anniversary, and they feel like, how could they love me and not remember my birthday? Other people, gifts are not that important to them, but it is for some people. And then there's quality time. Giving the other person your undivided attention. Now, I do not mean a husband and wife sitting on the couch watching television because someone else has your attention. I'm talking about sitting there with the TV off, computer down, not answering our phone, looking at each other and talking to each other. I'm talking about with a child, going where the child is and giving the child your undivided attention. If the child's on the floor, they're little, crawling on the floor, you go to the floor and you give them your undivided attention. Maybe you're reading a book to a 3-year-old and you're giving them your full attention. So in a dating relationship, it's those long conversations that you have with each other. And a parent-child, an adult child relating to a parent, if their language is quality time, you're sitting down and giving them an hour of your time and talk with them, man, that really communicates love to them. You don't have time to talk to your parent and you're an adult. Your parent may well feel unloved if this is their love language. So giving quality time for some people is their primary language. Now, it doesn't have to always be sitting down and talking. You can be taking a walk down the road and talking. You can go out to eat, assuming that you talk. We've all seen this in the restaurant. Husband and wife sitting at a table in the restaurant, and they both have their phone out, looking at the phone, not talking to each other. That's not quality time. So being in close proximity does not mean quality time. It's giving the person your undivided attention. And then number 5 is physical touch. We've long known the emotional power of physical touch. That's why we pick up babies and hold them and kiss them and cuddle them. Long before the baby understands the meaning of the word love, the baby feels love by physical touch. Now, in a marriage, that would be such things as holding hands, kissing, embracing, the whole sexual part of marriage, arm around the shoulder, driving down the road, you put your hand on their leg, just affirming touches. Now, we all know that there are abusive touches. And if you abuse someone physically, pushing them, shoving them, hitting them, this is their love language. I'm telling you, that's the worst thing you could ever do to that person, because it, again, is like a dagger in their heart. It's like you're killing them when you give abusive touches to anyone. So here's the basic concept. Out of those 5 love languages, each of us has a primary love language. One of the 5 speaks more deeply to us emotionally than the other 4. Now, we can receive love in all 5 languages, but if we had to give up one, we'd give up this one and then this one, but never this one. This is the one that really makes me feel love. It's very similar to spoken language. Every one of us grew up speaking a language with a dialect, and that's the one we understand best. I grew up speaking English Southern style, but everybody grows up speaking a language with a dialect, and we call it our native tongue. The same thing is true with love, that all of us have a primary love language. And if you don't speak the primary love language of the other person, they will not feel loved, even though you're speaking some of the other languages. And that's why people can be sincere, but be missing each other. They're speaking one of the languages, but not the right one, and they're not connecting emotionally with the other person. That's why children sometimes grow up not feeling loved. You know, to parents, I say, the question is not, do you love your children? The question is, do your children feel loved? I remember the young man who was in my office. He was 13 years old. He had run away from home, and he ended up in my counseling office. And he said, among other things, he said to me, my parents don't love me. They love my brother. They don't love me. I knew his parents. I knew they loved him. The problem was they never learned how to speak his primary love language. And so he grew up feeling unloved. And that's why he's running away, because he feels rejected by his parents. So learning how to speak the love language of the other person is extremely important. Now, the question arises then, how do you discover your own primary love language, or how do you discover someone else's primary love language? So let me give you 3 informal ways to do that. One is to observe their behavior and observe your behavior. How do you normally respond to other people? If you're always giving people affirming words, probably that's your language, because we tend to speak our own language. If you're always giving gifts to people, that's probably what you'd like to receive. If you're always giving people high fives or pat on the back, physical touch is probably your language. So observe your behavior, observe their behavior. And incidentally, you can discover a child's love language by the time they're 4 years old by observing their behavior. My son's love language is physical touch. When he was that age, I would come home in the afternoon. He would run to the door, grab my leg, and climb on me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter at that age never did that. She would say, Daddy, come into my room. I want to show you something. She wanted quality time. So your children will have different love languages, and this is one way you can discover it. Just observe how they respond to you and other people. A second question to ask yourself is, what do I complain about most often? And then about the other person, what do they complain about most often? The complaint reveals the love language. For example, if your spouse or someone that you have a close relationship with says, I just feel like we don't spend any time together anymore. I just feel like we're ships passing in the dark. They're telling you that quality time is their language. If they say to you when you go on a business trip and you come back home and they say, You didn't bring me anything? They're telling you that gifts is their love language. So what do they complain about? I had a 6-year-old child. A mother told me this. She said, my 6-year-old said to me, we don't ever go to the park anymore since the baby came. Quality time is his language. He and his mother used to go to the park together, and he had her full attention. Now the baby's here, and he's not getting it. So, see, the complaint is revealing the love language. And then the third question is this. What do I request most often? Because your request also reveals the love language. If you're saying to the other person, how does this outfit look on me? You're asking for quality. You're asking for words of affirmation. You really want them to say, looks nice, honey. If you say, a friend or a family member is going to the store, and you say, be sure and bring me a surprise, you're requesting a gift. If you say, could you give me a back rub, you're asking for physical touch. So our daughter, for example, when she was a teenager, she would say, Daddy, can we take a walk after dinner? She's asking me for quality time. My son would never walk with me. He said, walking is dumb. You're not going anywhere. If you're going somewhere, drive. What he would say is, Dad, can we play basketball in the backyard? And the way we played basketball, it was physical, okay? He was asking me for physical touch. So what do people ask you for, and what do you ask other people for? You put these three things together, and you can pretty well figure out your primary love language. Now, there is a free quiz. It is in English, however, at 5lovelanguages.com. If you go to the website, 5lovelanguages.com, there's a free quiz for married couples, there's a quiz for single adults, there's a quiz for teenagers, and there's a quiz for children. And you make several choices, and it will tell you what your primary love language is and what your secondary love language is, okay? So just another way that you can explore your love language. So the key is learning your own love language, learning the love language of the other person, and the two of you sharing that information with each other. The ideal would be that the two of you read the book together, and then you take the quiz in the back of the book or online. And I think maybe in the Spanish version, there's a quiz in the back of the book. I'm not sure about that. But take the quiz and discuss it. Now that you know each other's love language, now you know how to really meet their need for love. Now, some people say, Gary, what if their love language is something that just doesn't come natural for you? Well, let's face it. Most husbands and wives will have a different love language. And if their primary love language is the one that's least important to you, it will be a learning curve. You'll have to work to learn. It's not easy to learn another language. That's why I don't speak Spanish. It's hard to learn to speak Spanish for me, okay? But you can do it. Here's the good news. Even if you did not receive some of these love languages as a child, you can learn to speak them as an adult. I remember a husband who said to me, Dr. Chapman, my wife and I read your book, and we discussed it. And I found out that her love language is words of affirmation. And he said, I'm just not good at that. He said, it just doesn't come natural to me. It just seems like it doesn't seem right. He said, I just struggle with it. I said, okay. He said, I didn't receive any words of affirmation growing up. My parents never gave words of affirmation to me. I said, okay, let's write down some sentences that other men say to their wives. You know, honey, you look nice in that dress. Honey, this was a great meal. I really appreciate it. You know, I just write down some sentences for him. I said, now you go home and you stand in front of the mirror by yourself and you read these out loud. And you read them at least twice a day for a whole week. And then you come back and I want to see if you can say them without looking at your notes, okay? But he came back, he said them to me. He kind of stumbled on a couple of them, but he read them to me, or he said them to me. I said, now your assignment this week is you pick out one of these, any one you want to pick out, and you say it to your wife this week. Next week, you give her another one. The next week, you give her another one. And then I want to see you in 3 weeks. He came back and he said, I did it, Dr. Chapman, I did it. And I said, how did she respond? He said, on the third week, she said to me, what's going on with you? I've never heard you give me so many compliments. And he said, I just told her, honey, I'm trying to learn how to speak your love language because I love you so much. And she said, that is so sweet. I love you too. He said, Dr. Chapman, she hadn't said that in a long time. You see, when you speak the other person's love language, something inside of them emotionally draws them to you, and they're far more likely to start responding to you in a positive way. So you can learn to speak these languages even though they're not natural for you. And in the book, I talk about that. Just take little steps and you can learn how to speak the other person's love language. Now, remember, love is a choice. You see, what I'm giving you is information on how to effectively communicate love to the other person on an emotional level. I can't give you the motivation. I can't make you do it. In fact, one man said to me, Dr. Chapman, I read your book, and my wife and I took the quiz. And he said, she tells me that her love language is acts of service. But he said, I'll just tell you right now, if it's going to take my washing dishes for her to feel loved, she can forget that. And I said, if you want to live with a wife who has an empty love tank, that's your choice. I said, I much prefer to live with a wife who has a full love tank. I said, I've lived with both. Same woman, in the early years, empty love tank. In the latter years, full love tank. I much prefer the latter woman. If it takes washing dishes, man, show me where the sink is. Small price to pay to live with a happy woman, you know. So I know that every culture is different. And I know that some cultures, you know, men do these things, women do these things. I understand that. And consequently, if it's a woman's role in a particular culture to do certain things, she probably doesn't want her husband to do those things. But there's other things that she would like for him to do that would be culturally appropriate. So what you want to discover is, what are the things that would make your spouse feel appreciated? And the same thing is true in a dating relationship. In fact, if you can just talk about and discover each other's love language while you're dating, you're doing one of the best things you can do to prepare for marriage. Because you know the in-love experience where you have this euphoric feeling about they're the most wonderful person in the world, and your mother can see their flaws, but you can't. We call it falling in love or being in love. That only has a lifespan of 2 years, and you're going to come down off the high after 2 years. It's average 2 years. But if you've learned each other's love language and you're speaking the right language, then you hardly miss the euphoria because you still feel loved. And life is much easier to process when you feel loved. I wish I had known this in the early days of my marriage. I knew nothing about love languages. And my wife and I were in love, you know, and we dated for 2 years before we got married. So I came down off that euphoria about, you know, a few weeks after the honeymoon. And we had conflicts, and we didn't know how to solve conflicts. When you're in love, you don't think you'll have any. And we ended up arguing with each other and saying hateful words to each other. And it really got bad. And I remember in the middle of an argument one time, it was pouring down rain outside, and my wife walked out the front door and slammed the door into the rain. And I thought, oh my, this is bad. If a woman walks out of the rain, it's bad, okay? And I remember that I said to God after a while, I don't know what else to do. The woman won't listen to me. If she'd listened to me, we could have a good marriage. She won't listen to me. And I said, I don't know what to do. And as soon as I said that, there came to my mind a visual image of Jesus on his knees washing the feet of his disciples. And I heard God say to me, that's the problem in your marriage. You don't have the attitude of Jesus toward your wife. Man, it hit me hard, because I remember what Jesus said when he stood up. He said, I'm your leader, and in my kingdom, this is the way you lead. The leader serves. Whew. And I said, God, forgive me that with all my study of the Bible, I missed the whole point. We're here to serve each other, not to demand things of each other. We're here to serve each other. So please give me the attitude of Christ toward my wife. In retrospect, it's the greatest prayer I ever prayed about my marriage because God changed my heart and gave me a desire to serve my wife. 3 questions made this practical for me. Now remember, I knew nothing about love languages, but I started asking her these 3 questions. Honey, what could I do to help you? Second question, how could I make your life easier? Third question, how could I be a better husband? And when I asked those questions, she was willing to give me answers. She told me. Looking back on it, her answers told me what her love language was. I didn't know anything about it, but I was responding to her love language. I was speaking love to her. And you know what happened? Not overnight, but within 3 months, my wife started asking me those 3 questions. What can I do to help you? How can I make your life easier? How can I be a better wife? We've been walking this road a long time now, in which I've been reaching out to serve her and she's been reaching out to serve me. And we have an incredible marriage. In fact, I said to her the other day, you know, honey, if every woman in the world was like you, there'd never be a divorce. Why would a man leave a woman who is doing everything she can to help him? And my goal through these years has been to so serve my wife that when I'm gone, she'll never find another man to treat her the way I've treated her, okay? The woman's going to miss me. And listen, this can start with either person. See, sometimes a wife will just sit around and say, boy, if my husband would do that, man, I would love him too. Somebody's got to start it. Now, it'd be nice if the husband started it, but a wife can start it. You know, you can ask God to give you that attitude because, you know, in Ephesians chapter 5, it says, submitting yourselves one to another, serving one another. It's not just men or women serving men. We're serving each other. And you ask God to give you that attitude, the attitude of Christ toward your spouse, and you start asking those 3 questions, I tell you, there's a good chance that within 3 months, they'll start asking you those questions, and the whole marriage can be turned around. You see, love stimulates love. The Bible says we love God because he first loved us. We respond to God's love. That principle works in a human marriage. That if one of us has the attitude of Christ and reaching out to serve the other person, it stimulates love in the other person. And this is true in every human relationship. And that's why learning the person's love language, choosing to speak it, you know, it just changes all of life. It makes all of life more meaningful. And so that's why I think the book, every year, it's been out now 20 some years, every year it sells more than the year before. And that normally doesn't happen to books. And I think it's because people read it, they learn each other's love language, they speak it to each other, it changes the emotional climate in their marriage, and then they want their brother and his wife to have it, their sister and her husband, their mother and their daddy. It's gone all over the world, word of mouth, just one couple sharing it with another couple. So I hope that what we're sharing today is going to help you and motivate you to read the book, to take the quiz, to discuss it with your spouse or your dating partner, or if you're an adult, with your parents, and even with your children, if you have children still at home, to learn their love language and let the whole family understand. Mother has a love language, daddy has a love language, sister has a love language, brother has a love language, and we're going to learn how to love each other in our family. I'm telling you, that's the key to having a really healthy family, when everybody in the family feels loved. So let me stop there, and we can do some questions, and maybe I'll have some answers.
Great. Yes, wonderful. Okay, so here we have our first question. It says, my partner didn't want to read the book, so I started to try showing my love language. So I started to try showing the love language of my spouse, but nothing changed. How long should I keep going? It's a bit frustrating when I want to put in the work, but don't see really any response from my husband.
How long do you do that? 6 months.
6
Not
months?
6 weeks, 6 months. I'll give you an example. A lady came to me and she said, Dr. Chapman, my husband won't read the book. He won't even talk about us. She said, he works all the time. He has no time for me. And she said, I'm tired of it. I just feel like I can't go on like this. And I shared the concept of love languages with her. And we sat there and tried to figure out his love language. And then I challenged her to this. Would you be willing for 6 months, every week, at least once a week, you speak his love language and just see what happens? You don't have to tell him what you're doing. You don't have to tell him anything. You just speak his love language. And she said, 6 months is a long time. And I said, I know it is. But what have you got to lose? If it doesn't help, you're not any worse off. In fact, you feel better about yourself because you know you invested 6 months of loving the person, you know? And so the first 3 months or the first 3 weeks or so, her husband didn't say a word. And then he said to her one night after dinner, what's going on with you? You've been awfully kind to me lately. And she said, well, if you want to know the truth, I'm trying to learn how to be a better wife. He said, well, I knew something was going on. And then about another 3 or 4 weeks, he said one night, he said, I don't know what you're doing. He said, but it's not fair. She said, what do you mean? He said, well, you've been awfully nice to me lately. And you know I don't deserve that. I haven't been much of a husband to you, and I don't deserve that. And she said, I'm just telling you, I'm trying to learn to be a better husband. Well, it was probably 4 months into this when one night after dinner, he said to her, is there anything I could do to help you before I go out to my shop and work? And she said, well, if you like. And she told him something, and he did it. And then every week after that, he started asking her, is there something I could do before I go out to my shop? You see, now what's happening, she's teaching him her love language. He doesn't even know the concept, but she's teaching him how to love her. And he's asking her what he can do for her. So it will not turn around overnight. It takes more than 3 weeks. And what I say to couples, you know, they say to me, well, I tried this for 3 weeks, it didn't work. Well, listen, we're not trying to manipulate the person. We're trying to love them and let them see what it's like to have somebody that really loves them in a meaningful way. And we demonstrate that for 6 months. We can't guarantee that they'll reciprocate, but I'm telling you, I think 95% of the people will begin to reciprocate if you just set a goal for 6 months. If they don't, then you can just say, well, you know, honey, I don't know how you feel about us, but for the last 6 months, I have loved you in the best way I know how. And I think you'll have to admit that. But it seems to me you don't really care and you don't want to be in our marriage. And I don't know if that's the way you feel. I guess we should just stop. How do you feel? Whoa, now they've got to think about this because now they're about to lose something. They're about to lose somebody that's been loving them for 6 months in the right love language. You see, what happens to most couples? They don't do what I'm talking about. They don't give it 6 months. They complain to the spouse. They criticize the spouse, and they do it for 2 or 3 years, and they can criticize, and then they finally say, I'm out of here. And the spouse says, good riddance. I'm sick and tired of you anyway. See, it's hard to reject love over a long period of time. So I just say, give it a shot and see what happens.
Great answer. I think we can all try new things for at least 6 months, right?
Yes.
I think that's the key. We don't try as long as 6 weeks, for as long as 6 months. Okay, so here's another question. I have been married for 15 years and I have discovered that my spouse has a different love language than me. And that one in particular is very difficult for me. What can you say about that?
Well, I think it is often very difficult. It may be something that you did not receive as a child. It may be something where you just don't feel comfortable because you haven't experienced it. One of the questions is to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Why do I see this as being so difficult for me? And probably you can tell something in your past history that indicates why you feel that this is so difficult for you. It's good to explore that if you can find an answer. And then say to yourself, am I going to allow that, whatever happened to me in the past, to control my present and my future? No. I'm going to learn how to love my spouse, even though it's very difficult for me. And so you look at the ways in the book and how to express that love language, and you begin to reach out to express it with, yes, you're acknowledging to yourself, this is hard, this doesn't feel comfortable, I feel very uneasy about doing this, but I'm choosing to do it. This is where the concept, love is a choice and not a feeling. Love stimulates feelings, but love doesn't start with a feeling. Love starts with a choice. I'm married to this person, and I'm God's representative to this person. And I'm going to ask God to pour his love into my heart, and the Bible says he does that. And then I want to be his channel for loving my spouse in the right love language. So you take that approach, you begin to go against your feelings, and you'll find that more often you do it, the more comfortable it becomes. It's just like learning a new spoken language. The more you speak it, the easier it becomes. So yeah, it's fine to admit the reality. This is really hard for me. I don't feel comfortable with this. Many people are in that situation. But we don't allow our emotions to control our behavior.
Right. That's a very good answer. I think we're all going to be left with a lot to think about and put in practice, put into practice. Okay, here goes another question. My partner wasn't faithful. How can we love and trust each other again?
Yeah.
I think that's a hard one.
Yeah,
but definitely something, I mean, what I like about this question is that it shows the wanting to make things work out, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, this happens too many times in a marriage relationship. And I don't think there's anything more painful than for your spouse to be sexually unfaithful to you and be involved with somebody else. And I'm deeply empathetic with people who are going through that because it is deeply, deeply painful. The question is there life beyond that? And I believe there is. But here's what has to happen. The spouse has to acknowledge that what they did was wrong and turn away from that relationship and come back and request forgiveness of that spouse. There can be no reconciliation if they're still involved in the relationship. You can't reconcile with someone who is violating the covenant they made with you. But if they genuinely turn away from that relationship and come back and apologize to you, you choose to forgive them. Now remember, forgiveness is not a feeling, but forgiveness is a choice. You choose to lift the penalty. You choose to remove the emotional barrier that this created between the two of you so that now you can begin to go forward in the relationship. Now, if it's at all possible, counseling will be very helpful because the counselor is a third person out there that both of you are sharing your thoughts and feelings with, and they can help you understand each other and help you work through this. But if a counselor is not available, God can help you work through this. Now, forgiveness, let me make this clear, forgiveness does not destroy the memory. From time to time, even after you choose to forgive them, the memory will come back of what they did. And forgiveness does not erase all of the emotions. When the memory comes back of what they did, the emotions will come back. The hurt, the pain, sometimes the anger, those emotions will come back. But if after they have apologized and broken off the relationship and you have forgiven them, you take those memories and those emotions to God and you say, Lord, you know what I'm remembering today and you know what I'm feeling again. But I thank you that I have forgiven that. Now help me to do something good today. And you move out to express their love language in spite of the fact that you're feeling hurt and angry and whatever else you're feeling. You see, we don't control the memory and we don't control the emotions, but we do control how we respond to them. And what I'm saying is don't let your memory and your emotions control your behavior. You choose to love them in spite. You're not denying your feelings. You acknowledge them to God and to yourself. I'm feeling hurt again. I'm feeling angry again. But you're not allowing the emotions and the memory to control your behavior. Now, Let me say this about trust. Forgiveness does not restore trust. Forgiveness opens the door to the possibility that trust can be reborn. You see, you lost trust because they were untrustworthy. Now, what I'm saying is, over a period of time, if they are trustworthy, you will come to trust them again. So what I would say to the spouse who has been unfaithful and is now coming back and trying to work on the marriage, if it's the gentleman, if you want her to trust you again, here's what I suggest. You say to her, honey, my cell phone is yours anytime you want to look at it. My computer is yours anytime you want to look at it. If I tell you that I'm going over to George's house and help him work on his car, it's fine with me if you want to come by and see if I'm there. I'm through with deceit. I've hurt you enough. I don't want to hurt you anymore. You take that approach and your wife will come to trust you again. It might be 6 months, it might be 9 months, it might be a year, but your spouse will come to trust you again. Why? Because you are being trustworthy. So don't put yourself down because you don't trust. I can't tell you how many wives have been in my office and say to me, Dr. Chapman, I've forgiven him, but to be honest with you, I don't trust him. And I say, welcome to the human race. And then I explain what I've just explained to you. So trust can be reborn, but it takes time. In the meantime, you speak each other's love language. You seek to build your relationship and communication and being open and honest with each other, and you're growing together. And again, a counselor can help you in that process if you have availability to work with a counselor.
Okay, great. Now, here's our last question, I think. If this is on a dating relationship, if I've been dating for around a year and I feel like I don't understand I don't know what love language my partner has, but he keeps saying that he's with me and that's enough. Like, just because he wants to be with me, that's showing that he loves me, but that doesn't fill my love tank. What would you say to that? Like, what would your advice be to talk to him that it's important for this person to like learn their love languages?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this book is in Spanish or not, but I do have a singles edition.
I think so. This one? Or no?
No, it's not that one.
Which one?
That is a good book to read before you get married.
Yeah, it's a very good book.
Things I wish I'd known before we got married. I'd say read that book together.
Yes.
It does deal with the falling in love and the love languages. There's a chapter in there on that. Right. There's another whole book called The 5 Love Languages Singles Edition, just to single adults. Right. It may not be in Spanish, I don't know, but that one is in Spanish. So I'd say take that one, okay? And just ask him if he would you read a chapter a week, and then you discuss the questions at the end of the chapter. And it'll take you through the love languages as well as several other things. Just 12 things I deal with. Before you get married, those are 12 things that I know now I wish I'd have known before I got married. So that is a book that a couple can work through that will really, really help them decide and make an intelligent decision. Should we move to marriage or should we not move to marriage? So yeah, that would be the ideal. Now, if he refuses to read a book or a chapter with you, that's a red flag waving. That really says he doesn't care enough about you to invest time trying to understand you and trying to understand your relationship. So a guy who says, I'm not going to read a book, I'm not going to discuss a book with you, I would just say that's a red flag waving to say, you don't want to walk down this road, because if that's where he is now while you're dating, he's not going to be different after you get married. He's going to be worse. So, the purpose of dating is to get to know each other and make an intelligent decision of should we get married or should we not get married. So don't feel badly about breaking off a dating relationship. If they're not willing to walk with you and learn and grow together, in my opinion, you should break it off. Yeah, I know you like the security of having somebody, but there are things worse than being single. And that's being married to somebody that doesn't treat you like a human and doesn't respect you. So yeah, those are my thoughts. But I do think the book you mentioned there would be an excellent book for anyone who's in a serious dating relationship, not only to read, but to read and work through the answers and all with the person you're dating.
Gary, on a personal note, have you had very difficult years in your marriage?
Yes, the first several years were very, very difficult. And I discuss that in some of my books, because we never read a book on marriage before we got married.
Mm-hmm.
We never had premarital counseling. We met with a pastor for 1 hour, the pastor who did our ceremony for 1 hour. So, I'd finished college, I'd finished 1 year of seminary, and I thought I was mature.
Right.
and we were in love, and we thought we were going to be happy forever. But as I said, we lost those emotional feelings pretty early in the relationship, and our differences were very different. And my wife was very independent because her father had died when she was 13. And she had kind of, she really took care of her younger sister because her mother had to work. And so she was very independent, and she had her ideas of how things should be done. I had my idea, and we just clashed. And not only did we lose the feelings, but we felt negative feelings toward each other. And what compounded it for me is I was in seminary studying to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, there's no way I can be this miserable at home and get up and preach hope to people. I can't do that. And that's when God changed my heart and gave me the attitude of serving her. So, yeah, that's why I think, I look back on that, and I think God allowed us to go through that so that I would have empathy for people who are struggling. Because I know what it feels like, that you just feel like it's never going to work. We're just too different. We don't agree on anything. It's never going to work. And so I have empathy for people. And I know, I probably would never have gone into counseling if we hadn't gone through that. But because God allowed us to go through that, I think it prepared me for what I've done with my life through the years. Yeah.
So I think we can wrap it up now, Gary. So it was an honor having you with us, Gary. You're definitely inspiring us and filling us with hope that we can have great, long-lasting relationships with kids, family, spouses, practically anyone. You mentioned that it's been 20-something years. Well, it's 28 years since the book was published, The 5 Love Languages, 1992. And like you said, it's been selling more and more each year, because I feel like this is a part of your legacy to everyone that is helping people be happier and in better relationships. And so we're very grateful for all of your work, for sharing your work with everyone in so many languages, because now you can find your books in many languages, I think. So thank you very much, Gary. It was an honor.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed being with you. And it is very, very encouraging to see the way this book has helped so many couples. And I hope that all of those who are listening today will see that this is a really important ingredient in having good relationships. And listen, life's deepest meaning is not found in things. It's found in relationships. And we can have good relationships, and learning how to love each other is an important part of having good relationships. So thanks for what you're doing.